one time on Long Island Sound, a few years back, we were blackfishing, and we were fishing on a very small wreck, pretty much room for just one boat, and a boat 2 to 3 times the size of ours decided they would like to fish there too. So they eased straight up to us and just kept coming and coming and coming and tried to force us off of our anchor. And my captain was feeling as if it was unsafe for us to be under that small boat, and those guys were basically, pushing us out of there, but he wasn't willing to risk our lives or our vessel. But there was a lot of yelling and hand signaling, let's say, back and forth between the various groups. The end of it being we pulled our anchor and moved off, to the other guys saying, you bunch of babies, what are you ever going to do about this? So the next day I wrote it up in my Newsday column and shamed the boat. Boy, when I think back to fishing with my dad, we actually moved out to Long Island from the Bronx in 1966, so I'm a little different from everyone here in terms of having generations to lean back on and to learn from. When we moved out here, there was maybe one fishing magazine and Sports Afield and Outdoor Life. The people who were baymen were very, very tight-lipped, and we had to actually figure a lot of it out ourselves. So one of the things I learned from my dad in terms of the fishing was you have to experiment. You don't have to stay the course. If what you're doing's not working, you try something else. Another thing that he stumbled upon that most serious anglers refer to now is big bait, big fish. And my dad was one for pulling the biggest lure out of the tackle box or the biggest piece of live bait out of the well and fishing with that. And I watched him catch many big fish before I actually started following along and doing the same thing. But I guess the 2 most important things I did learn from him is honesty's the best policy when it comes to fishing. Just like Reed said again, the size of the fish, just tell the truth. It's as simple as that. And then you don't have to worry about covering up your tracks when people start asking you questions later. And the single most vital thing I took out of it was, I guess I was maybe 6 or 7, and I rode my bike to a local lake, and I caught 50 sunnies. And I filled them all into a bucket, and I brought them home, every single one of them, and there were hundreds in the lake. It didn't seem that you could catch too many. And my dad stood over me and made me clean all 50 of them. And then my parents made me, over the next few weeks, eat all 50 of them. And he said, you never, ever take home more than you can eat. Very good. I was about 22 or so, and my dad had just got his first boat, and it was anchored out on, he was keeping it out on Moriches Bay. So he told me one Thanksgiving I could take my buddies flounder fishing as long as I didn't go east of Moriches Inlet. So we popped out there and started fishing for just a little bit. Flounder weren't biting. My friends talked me into going east of the inlet. And we went all the way up, about as far up east in the bay as you could go, and grounded us on a sandbar. So, with the tide dropping out, the temperature about 29, 30 degrees, we were getting cold, it was getting dark. We all waded ashore, and fortunately there was somebody at one of the houses on shore on the southern side of Moriches Bay. So they fed us, gave us a little cab money, sent us home. But the scary thing about it was I had to show up back at my house with no boat on the trailer. And my dad saying, where is my boat? Though I was clamming on Great South Bay, and I guess I was working over towards Barrett Beach. And there were 2 types of clam boats people had back then, or maybe 3. There were tong boats, which were the larger ones with the beautiful, beautiful decks on them. Then there were the garvies, which were the square front, usually very low to the water. And I had what was called a Sharpie, which is more of your traditional pointy bow. It was about maybe 20 feet long. Not particularly seaworthy, but it got me there and back. So on the back of that, I had an old Johnson outboard motor that you just held by the tiller and steered yourself. On this particular day, it was pretty rough going back, and the waves were crashing over. It was the middle of the summer, so it wasn't cold or anything, just wet and nasty heading back. And as I'm coming back, I decided that the only place the water really wasn't crashing on was right where my motor was. So I actually decided to sit on top of my motor. I was about 16, not so bright. So I got on top of my motor, and I was just steering with the tiller right between my legs. as we were going, dodging the waves. So I did that for a little while, and I reasoned that maybe this isn't the smartest place to be. I could be overboard in a second, and my boat would just be doing circles. Nobody'd know where I was. So I got down off of my engine and sat beside it and grabbed the tiller, and about 5 minutes later, my engine blew up. There had been a gas buildup inside the cover, and it shot the cover about 30 to 40 feet straight up in the air. It sounded like a big M80 going off right next to me. And so that cover was as close to me as, it was right here, boom, just straight up in the air, right past my ear. And I turned around and I watched it as it was just falling out of the sky behind me. The amazing thing was, I sprayed out the fire that was on my engine. It never stopped running, and I went back and got the top and finished my trip all the way home. That's just how you did it when you were a clammer.